there, this is the Bread of Life Devotionals. We are journeying through the book of Colossians, and today we look at chapter 2. If you're new here, subscribe and share with a friend the wonderful news of the gospel. In this chapter, we see Paul's desire to see people he had never met. We see his warmth and his concern for the believers in Colossae, the believers in Laodicea, and others that he mentions. We see how he longs to see them comforted and encouraged in the faith and knit in love, and how he desires for them to attain to the full understanding of the mystery of God, which is Jesus Christ. And Paul says that all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge are found in Jesus Christ. Outside of that, there is no equal. Bible scholars tell us that the believers in Colossae had been infiltrated by false teachers who were causing the people to bring in Jewish legalism and also a sort of what we call asceticism, which is simply strict personal disciplines that were supposed to supplement the faith of the people. But Paul writes, number one, to acknowledge the steadfast faith of the believers in Colossae, and he calls them to continue walking after Christ, just as they had received Jesus Christ as Lord. Paul writes to encourage, to exhort, to urge the believers in Colossae to continue following after Christ, just as they had been taught, to be rooted in him. And now rooting here means that they were immovable. You know, when you're rooted somewhere, it means you have a steady base, a steady foundation. And so he tells them to be rooted in Christ and to build upon him and to be established in the faith, lest they be deceived by human traditions, or what he calls empty philosophy or vain philosophy. And so we see here Paul acknowledging that the believers were steadfast in their faith. He exhorts them. But number three, he also warns them against following after human traditions and vain philosophy. And this is because the church was facing these false teachings from what we call false teachers. And you know, in our time today, there's a lot of deception. There's a lot of error. There's a lot of inconsistencies in terms of doctrine. And unless one is steadfast in the faith, unless one is rooted in Jesus Christ, because Paul mentions that he wants these people to continue in what they had been taught. And remember, it was Epaphras who had labored in this church to teach the believers about the truth of Jesus Christ, because in chapter 1 he mentions that he had faithfully ministered in the church at Colossae. And so we see Paul also outlining some of the things that these believers in Colossae were going back to. He asks them, who is judging you against matters food, matters drink, matters festivals, matters Sabbath observance? And Paul lists some of the things that the believers had started going back to, and yet Christ has set them free. That is why Paul tells them that they are complete in Christ, and Christ, you know, in Christ lies all the bodily, all the Godhead in bodily form, that they were complete in Christ, and that they had received the circumcision of Christ as opposed to the fleshly and the physical circumcision. And Paul also encourages the believers to know that Christ had triumphed over the power of darkness. Christ had triumphed over principalities. He had triumphed over the forces of darkness. In fact, he uses the word disarm. He had divested them of their power, that they were no longer powerful as they were. And so he reminds these believers that any charge any charge that was against them, Christ had blotted it. And so they were free and they were complete in Christ. They did not need to do anything else to add on to the work that Christ had done. What Christ has done was complete and it was final. And so he says, any other ritual or religious tradition was not adding to their faith. It was just an imposed form of of religion and asceticism. And so I encourage us, even as we wind up on this devotional today, please be rooted, know what you believe in. Know what Christ has done for you, lest you be deceived by the traditions of men that are not founded on Jesus Christ. Thank you so much for taking time to click on this video. Leave your comments. Let me know what you think of Colossians chapter 2, even as we gear up for Colossians chapter 3. The Lord richly bless you.